I became the exclusive errand runner for the crown prince of high society. One errand after another, I somehow ended up in his bed. But before graduation, I asked for a breakup, the first time he ever looked at me coldly. Reason? I sighed. Always being on top is exhausting. 5 years later, I returned for work. The moment we met again, he pinned me to the sofa all night. From now on, he whispered against my waist, from now on, I'll take the lead, every night. Andrew Wilson, the crown prince of high society, was unbelievably lazy. I seized the opportunity, stood out among countless competitors, and successfully became his personal errand runner throughout college. One errand after another, and somehow I ran straight into his bed. The people who once sneered at me had to watch, wide-eyed, as we dated for 2 years. They could only marvel that I had, at last, flown up the branch and become a phoenix. No one expected that right before graduation, I would be the one to propose a breakup. It was the first time Andrew Wilson looked at me with a cold expression. Give me a reason. I let out a breath. Always being on top is truly exhausting. And in winter, taking off your long johns is nearly impossible. 5 years later, when I returned home for work, the very first meeting we had, Andrew pinned me down on the sofa the whole night. He coaxed in a low, tender voice, from now on, I'll handle it myself. You can just enjoy, all right? I hadn't expected to run into Andrew so quickly. While studying in the UK, I had met Julia Lopez, heiress of the Lopez family, during a marketing project. Impressed by my abilities, she invited me to work at their overseas branch. Recently, I was invited back to the domestic headquarters as Deputy Director of Marketing. One of the projects I received happened to involve a cross-brand collaboration between the Lopez family and the Wilson family. That evening, I had to head over to the Wilson family to coordinate with their team. As was customary, when learning about a partner company, Andrew's name, now President Wilson, was naturally mentioned. Since taking office, I had handled my relationships with colleagues well, and many of them were quite close to me. Some who had previously worked with the Wilson family couldn't help but pull long faces and mutter complaints. President Wilson is a terrifying workaholic. He nitpicks every single detail to the extreme. Last time, he rejected more than 10 versions of our proposal. We were numb from the revisions. I even went to a temple to pray, hoping everything would go smoothly this time. Everyone chimed in, one after another. I kept smiling as I listened, though my thoughts had already drifted far away. Andrew truly was meticulous to the point of being unreasonable. Even in college, when looking for an errand runner, his requirements were absurdly strict. Always being on call was the bare minimum. His coffee had to be exactly 47 degrees Celsius. Meals had to be pre-ordered at a private restaurant, never a minute later than the time he set. Even reminders for his class schedule had to be exact, not a second earlier or later. Those conditions eliminated a large number of competitors. I stood out because not only could I meet every demand, I even took the initiative to push myself further. I studied his style and prepared his outfits in advance. I noticed his mild cleanliness habits and volunteered to handle some of the cleaning. I even, barely, played his video games for him. That was how I became the high-paid errand runner that everyone envied, hated, and resented. But Andrew, a workaholic? I had my doubts. After all, in the 2 years we were together, no one knew better than I just how lazy he was. Too lazy to go out. Too lazy to socialize. Too lazy to attend class. Even when it came to intimacy, he was too lazy to move. Forget about carrying me to the bath like the male leads in romance novels. Most of the time, I had to put in all my strength just to drag him into the bathtub. Andrew hated the cold. Especially in winter, he dressed like an onion, layer after layer. We would kiss all the way from the front door to the living room, and I would peel off his down jacket, sweater, long-sleeved shirt, thermal underwear, heated vest, trousers, and finally his long johns. By the time the whole process was over, I was already sweating buckets. On the day I asked for a breakup, I tentatively asked him if he could take the lead, just once. He lounged lazily, casting me a sidelong glance. Didn't you say it felt better when you controlled the pace yourself? I shut my mouth, resigned to tugging at his pants. Inwardly, I sighed at my fate, born to be a workhorse in this lifetime. That final night together, I played recklessly. Then, when we got out of bed, I brought up the breakup. Andrew froze for a long while. For the first time, his face went cold. Give me a reason. I stood by the door and sighed. Always being on top is exhausting. And in winter, taking off your long johns is just too hard. He was silent for half a beat, then hurled a pillow at me with force. Get out. The anger and embarrassment in his voice were poorly concealed. So I did as I was told, I rolled right out. And that roll lasted 5 years. When I met with the project leader from the Wilson family, she looked a little troubled. President Brown, I'm sorry. We might need to add one more person to this meeting. Since higher-ups valued this collaboration, I expressed my understanding. Half an hour later, the office door opened. Everyone stood up to welcome the newcomer. My gaze swept upward from the polished leather shoes. A tailored black suit framed a body of lean, solid muscle. Every movement radiated the allure of a mature man. When my eyes finally landed on his face, an old acquaintance. President Wilson. The room greeted him with respectful deference. The black eyes that once always looked drowsy and languid now carried a sharper, colder edge. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod. I returned the greeting with a polite smile. No hesitation, no pause. He glanced down at his watch, his voice hoarse with long hours of work. Let's not waste time. Someone handed him a file. I calmly presented the preliminary plan, though in my heart I silently sighed for that colleague who had prayed at the temple. Your prayers were probably in vain. It looked inevitable that we would be targeted. But to my surprise, Andrew didn't make things difficult. He raised only a few questions before nodding in agreement to end the meeting. The marketing team exchanged bewildered glances. That's it? We passed? President Wilson must be in a good mood today. This is great. I made a small joke. Don't celebrate too early. The real headache is still ahead. As the project leader saw us out, we happened to run into Andrew stepping out of the elevator. Standing beside him was his childhood sweetheart, Sophia Rivers. I became the crown prince of Beijing's exclusive errand runner. One errand after another, and somehow I ended up in his bed. But before graduation, I was the one who proposed a breakup. It was the first time he looked coldly at me. Reason. I sighed. Always being on top is exhausting. 5 years later, I returned to China for work. The very first time we met again, he pressed me onto the sofa for an entire night. From now on, he coaxed as he rubbed my waist, I'll handle it myself every night, all right? Andrew Wilson, the crown prince of Beijing, was impossibly lazy. I spotted the opportunity and stood out from a sea of competitors. That was how I became his errand runner all through college. Running errands day after day, I somehow ran straight into his bed. People who once mocked me could only watch with wide eyes as we dated for 2 years. They sighed, marveling that I had, at last, risen like a phoenix. No one expected that on the eve of graduation, I would take the initiative to break up. It was the first time Andrew Wilson's face turned cold. Give me a reason. I let out a sigh. Always being on top is exhausting. And in winter, your long johns are impossible to take off. 5 years later, when I returned to work in China, the very first time we met, Andrew pinned me to the sofa the entire night. He rubbed my waist and coaxed softly, from now on, I'll do all the work myself. You just lie back and enjoy, okay? I hadn't thought I would run into Andrew so soon. While studying in the UK, I met Julia Lopez, heiress of the Lopez family, during a marketing project. Impressed by my ability, she invited me to join their overseas branch. Recently, I was invited back to the domestic headquarters as Deputy Director of Marketing. One of the projects I took on happened to involve a cross-brand collaboration between the Lopez family and the Wilson family. That evening, I needed to go to the Wilson family to coordinate with their team. As was routine, when learning about the partner company, Andrew's name, now President Wilson, naturally came up. Since assuming the role, I had managed relationships with colleagues fairly well, so in private they treated me with some closeness. Among the team, those who had worked with the Wilson family before couldn't help but whisper complaints. President Wilson is a terrifying workaholic. When it comes to work, he nitpicks everything to the extreme. Last time, he rejected more than a dozen drafts. We were numb from revising. I even went to the temple to pray, hoping things go smoothly this time. Everyone chimed in, one after another. I kept a smile on my face, though my mind had long drifted away. Andrew truly was meticulous to the point of harshness. Even back in college, when hiring an errand runner, his standards were absurdly strict. Always being on call was the bare minimum. His coffee had to be exactly 47 degrees Celsius. Meals had to be pre-ordered at a private restaurant, never later than his set dining time. Even reminders for his classes had to be precise, not a second earlier or later. Those rules weeded out most of the competition. I was able to stand out because not only could I meet all of his requirements, I even went beyond. For example, I observed his style and prepared his outfits in advance. I noticed his mild obsession with cleanliness and volunteered to handle some of the cleaning. I even, barely, filled in for him as a gaming substitute. That was how I became the high-paid errand runner everyone envied, hated, and resented. But calling Andrew a workaholic? I had my doubts. In the 2 years we were together, no one knew better than I did just how lazy he was. Too lazy to go out. Too lazy to socialize. Too lazy to attend class. Even when it came to intimacy, he was too lazy to move. Forget about carrying me to the bath like a male lead in romance novels. Most of the time, I had to put in a great deal of effort just to drag him into the tub. Andrew was someone terribly afraid of the cold. Especially in winter, he dressed like an onion, layer upon layer. We would kiss our way from the front door to the living room, and I would peel off his down jacket, sweater, long-sleeved shirt, thermal underwear, heated vest, trousers, and finally his long johns. By the time I finished, I was already drenched in sweat. On the day I proposed the breakup, I cautiously asked if he could, just once, take the initiative. He lay sprawled lazily, casting me a sidelong glance. "Didn't you say it felt better when you set the pace yourself?" I shut my mouth and resigned myself to tugging at his pants. I thought bitterly that perhaps my fate in this life was simply to toil. That last time together, I let myself go wild. And afterward, I brought up the breakup. Andrew froze for a long moment. For the first time, his face turned cold. "Give me a reason." Standing at the door, I sighed. "Always being on top is exhausting. And in winter, your long johns are just too hard to take off." He was silent for a while before hurling a pillow at me. "Get out." His shame and anger barely concealed. So I obeyed. I rolled right out. And that roll lasted 5 years. When I met with the Wilson family's project leader, she looked uneasy. "President Brown, I'm sorry, but we might have one more person joining the meeting." It was understandable, upper management was paying attention. I nodded in agreement. Half an hour later, the office door opened and everyone stood to greet the newcomer. My gaze swept upward from polished shoes. A perfectly tailored black suit framed lean, firm muscles. Every move radiated the charm of a mature man. When my eyes reached his face, an old acquaintance. President Wilson. The room greeted him with respect. The black eyes that once always seemed half asleep now carried a sharp, chilling edge. When our gazes met, he gave a small nod. I smiled politely in return. No pause, no hesitation. He lowered his head to check his watch, his voice hoarse from long hours of work. "Let's keep it quick." Someone handed him a file, and I calmly laid out the preliminary plan. Inwardly, though, I sighed for that teammate who had prayed at the temple. Your prayers were probably wasted. It seemed inevitable we'd be targeted. But unexpectedly, Andrew didn't make things difficult. He only raised a few points before nodding for the meeting to adjourn. The marketing team exchanged bewildered looks. "That's it? We passed?" President Wilson must be in a good mood today. "That's great." I joked lightly, this isn't the time to be happy yet. The real headache's still ahead. As the project leader escorted us out, we happened to run into Andrew stepping out of the elevator. Standing beside him was his childhood sweetheart, Sophia Rivers. Sophia Rivers was a clever woman who knew exactly how to conduct herself. Back when I was with Andrew, she would openly call me sister-in-law. Her demeanor was natural yet kept its distance, so no one could tell she harbored feelings for him. Until near graduation, when we ran into each other at a hot spring resort. She affectionately pulled me into the water and, in the gentlest tone, spoke the cruelest words. "Sophie Brown, you probably don't know, but after graduation, Andrew and I will be engaged. You might believe that true love conquers all, but that's just a fairy tale made for ordinary people. In reality, even regular families value a proper match, let alone the wealthy. Relationships are, at their core, an exchange of benefits. I can help Andrew. You, with neither money nor connections, what can you offer him? If I were you, I'd take what I could now and walk away. That would be the smart choice." She truly was clever. After all, this was a place where no recording or filming was allowed. I looked at her and slowly smiled. "If it's really as you say, then you only need to wait for us to break up. Why can't you hold back now? Wasn't it Andrew's attitude toward me that made you feel threatened?" Her smile stiffened for a second, but she quickly arched her brows in provocation. "Girlfriends can be many, but a childhood sweetheart, there's only one. How can you be so sure he's calling Sophie, and not Sophia?" I stood up and returned the jab. "Sorry, but we usually call each other by our full names." Later, though, I still brought up the breakup. Not because of Sophia, but because my plans for the future had never included Andrew. In fact, I even agreed with some of what she said. It was precisely because he suggested taking me home to meet his parents that I panicked and ran away in the night. He was far too lazy. Too lazy to even consider the consequences. What if his parents disapproved? What if they tried to trip me up and ruin my future? What if they demanded I become a full-time housewife, and I ended up entangled in endless conflicts with my mother-in-law? Back then, Andrew held me in his arms and said casually, "Don't worry about it." Half of my heart instantly went cold. You're their son, of course you can afford not to worry. But in their eyes, I was nothing more than a sparrow dreaming of climbing onto a higher branch, something they could crush with a single hand. Dating a rich young heir might be tolerated, but marriage was an entirely different matter. I never gambled on human nature. I only trusted myself. The project leader followed my gaze and smiled knowingly. "That's the daughter of one of our partners. She often comes looking for President Wilson. She lowered her voice mysteriously. People say their engagement is just around the corner. Handsome man, beautiful woman, don't they make quite the pair? When Andrew looked at her, his cold expression softened just a fraction. Sophia's eyes shone with joy, her smile barely contained. I pulled back my gaze, returned a polite smile, and said, they do look well matched. As I was leaving, a cold voice called out behind me. President Brown. I paused, turning naturally with a courteous smile. President Wilson, is there something you need? His eyes rested on my face, his tone distant and formulaic. This evening I have a dinner scheduled with President Lopez. You should come as well. We can also go over a few details while we're at it. Ah, so this was what he had been waiting for. Without betraying a hint of emotion, I replied, then I'll shamelessly join the president's dinner. He gave a vague, unreadable smile. But Sophia's gaze faltered the instant it fell on me. For a moment, her expression almost slipped out of control. Judging from the look of things, their engagement didn't seem to be going smoothly. I nodded at her, my smile only brighter. Thankfully, Andrew didn't offer me a ride. I followed his Bugatti in my BMW. We arrived at a private restaurant. What a coincidence, it was one of my regular spots. They didn't offer delivery, and back when I was his errand runner, I often came here using his membership card to pick up meals. The thought left me with complicated feelings. Julia and I weren't just colleagues, in private, we were friends. So at this high society gathering, I didn't feel too out of place. Mostly because Andrew didn't deliberately try to make me drink, nor did he put me on the spot. It almost felt like a simple dinner. President Brown, you're so beautiful. Do you have a boyfriend? A rich second-generation man leaned toward me, a careless grin on his face. I smiled and shook my head. George, are you planning to introduce someone to me? He perked up, leaned in even closer, and pointed to himself. Hey, what about me? Julia shot him a glare. George, cut out that playboy act. What are you talking about? I'm serious this time. To be honest, I fell in love with President Brown at first. The heavy thud of a wineglass hitting the mahogany table cut him off. The dull sound pulled every gaze toward Andrew. Meeting his heavy, oppressive eyes gave me a sudden jolt of familiarity. But the lapse lasted only a moment. He quickly looked away, glanced down at his watch, and said flatly, it's late. Let's call it a night. As soon as he spoke, a man who had been silent until then suddenly lit up, eyes gleaming. I remember now, you're a blogger, right? He cast Andrew a mocking look. No wonder. Andrew's your loyal fan. I've seen him play your videos on repeat so many times, he even. Shut up. Andrew's warning was mild but firm. Then he turned to me, his expression calm. He's just joking. Don't take it to heart. I snapped back to myself and quickly replied, no, it's my honor. Andrew paused, then let the corner of his lips lift ever so slightly. President Brown, let me take you home. I was just about to refuse, but he slid in his familiar excuse, we can go over a few more details on the way. All right. I understood. He was doing this on purpose. Julia frowned and stepped in front of me. Can't whatever it is wait until later? I patted her shoulder with resignation. It's fine. Since President Wilson has time today, I'll settle it early. When I got into Andrew's car, I overheard his friends muttering behind me. George, the rich playboy, sounded indignant. No wonder he wouldn't let me hit on her. I bet he wants her for himself. Another man mused, Andrew really is acting strange, this Sophie Brown looks familiar, like I've seen her somewhere. Then came the dawning realization. Oh, isn't this Andrew's first love? Julia, huh? Bang. The car door slammed shut, cutting off all the noise. Andrew's driver drove my car in front as a lead, while I resigned myself to sitting in the passenger seat of Andrew's car. The cabin was silent, thick with a suffocating weight. I lowered the window a little, letting the night breeze in to scatter the heavy air. The words from dinner replayed in my mind, dragging me back to the past. Back in university, I started making self-discipline vlogs. At the time, there weren't many creators in that niche, so I quickly built up a following. With the occasional sponsorship, I managed to save a fair bit of money each month. Andrew used to sprawl on the sofa, frowning as he watched my videos. Where do you get all that endless energy every day? He asked, baffled. I played along timidly. Maybe because I'm just naturally high energy. A lie. It was only for the money. He stared at me for a long time, then lazily ruffled his hair. Hey, why don't we just date? I was so startled my jaw nearly dropped. Being his errand runner meant at least I got paid. But being his girlfriend? That would mean serving him without compensation. I tried to decline politely. If you're looking for a nanny, then... Andrew actually laughed in exasperation. In your eyes, is being my girlfriend really that painful? He said that if I agreed, my salary would double, and I wouldn't even have to do the chores. Well, in that case, I'd have more time to study. And so, just like that, we dated recklessly for 2 years. At a red light, the car slowed to a stop. We were nearly home when I couldn't help but speak up. President Wilson. But his long fingers tapped the steering wheel, cutting me off abruptly. In these 5 years, did you ever think about me? I froze, unsure how to respond. Of course I had. Especially late at night, when everything was still, I sometimes found myself missing his body. Andrew's gaze landed on my face, sweeping over me like invisible hands, tracing every inch of skin until all my thoughts had nowhere left to hide. I swallowed hard. After a long silence, he seemed to confirm something. The corner of his lips curved upward. Good. Good? What was good? Before I could ask, he leaned over and kissed me. That familiar cool mint scent shattered all the strangeness, awakening a long-buried reaction. Overwhelming. Unstoppable. 90 seconds of red light had never felt so long. The instant the green light flicked on, I shoved him away, struggling to steady my ragged breathing. The driver in front had already pulled ahead. Andrew turned the wheel sharply, veering off the route. His speed increased. Furious yet too afraid to grab the wheel, I snapped, Andrew, where are you taking me? My place. What for? To test the results. His tone was calm, without the slightest trace of shame. I nearly exploded. A bitter laugh escaped me. Does your fiancé know you're entangled with your ex-girlfriend? The car rolled slowly into the underground garage. At last, he turned to me, eyes gleaming with a mocking smile. I don't have a fiancé. All I know is, my girlfriend thought I was too lazy, abandoned me, and went abroad for 5 years. Today, I'm taking back everything that belongs to me. What? He lifted me out of the car and carried me straight into the elevator. No matter how I struggled or bit him, he refused to let go. Andrew even chuckled. Do you remember what you did to me on this very bed that night? Thrown onto the familiar softness, my memory stirred awake at his words. Handcuffs, whips, ropes, uniforms. On the day of our breakup, I had thought, this is the last time, so why not make it wild? Andrew's body had been covered with ambiguous red marks, and when he got up to shower, his legs nearly gave out beneath him. Now, staring at the unchanged room, I shrank back instinctively. What do you think you're doing? He moved slowly, unhurriedly removing his jacket, undoing his tie, his cufflinks, his collar. The rise and fall of his firm chest came into view as he half-kneeled on the bed. His hand clamped around my ankle and dragged me down. He pressed my knees apart and slid in between, every movement radiating dominance. Not going to test my progress, Sophie? As he spoke, his hand moved with practiced ease to a certain spot on my lower back, pressing lightly. A shudder coursed through me, my scalp prickling instantly. Andrew's brows lifted. He raised his long fingers, and in the dim light a faint sheen glistened at the tip. Remember now? It was as if he had shed the polite mask, revealing his true, wicked self. Yes. I remembered everything. This time, I seized the initiative, yanked his hair, and bit down on him with a tilted head. After all, tomorrow was the weekend. No work. What happens when two bodies, so perfectly familiar with each other, reunite after years apart? It was like a violent chemical reaction, unstoppable once ignited. The bedroom, the bathroom, the floor, until finally, the living room sofa. My blurred gaze landed on the swaying curtains as dawn crept in. Never in my life had I seen Andrew so diligent. God, it was killing me. My throat was hoarse and raw. Weakly, I pushed at him. Get off. Instead, he only held me tighter. Fine. Whatever. With the ache in my abdomen throbbing dully, I drifted into unconscious sleep. When I woke, Andrew was massaging my waist, easing the discomfort. Sensing my stirring, he buried himself against my neck, voice tender. From now on, I'll do all the work. You just lie back and enjoy, all right? I pushed him away and stood up. We'll see. For a split second, his face froze. What do you mean? I don't plan on getting back together. Not yet. He stared, then let out a short, incredulous laugh. Sophie, are you playing me? I looked at him, genuinely puzzled. Weren't you the one who invited me to test your progress? You wanted it, I agreed. And now you're claiming I'm taking advantage of you. Andrew sat there, covered in bite marks, his face dark as he watched me calmly get dressed. Finally, through clenched teeth, he spat, fine. The customer is welcome to return any time. Even with all the thick skin I'd built up over the years, I nearly stumbled at his words. I refused his offer to drive me home and left on my own. Julia had sent me a message the night before, asking me to call her when I was free. I could already guess what she wanted to ask, Andrew. After I gave her a brief account of what had happened, she burst into laughter. You're not afraid he'll retaliate? His methods aren't exactly gentle. I smiled. No. Back then, I broke up with him precisely because I was sure he was too lazy to bother making trouble. A man who took half an hour just to come downstairs certainly wouldn't chase me across 8,000 miles to the UK. This reunion had caught me off guard. For a moment, seeing how he'd changed, I worried he might cause me problems. But instead, he went out of his way to create chances to quench my thirst. Even welcomed me to come again. How bad could a man like that really be? Sure enough, after that, the project moved forward smoothly. Aside from normal collaboration, there was barely any overtime at all. And when there wasn't overtime, well, let's just say we spent the time enjoying ourselves. After enduring the busiest stretch, a few months later, the project finally came to an end. This campaign's results turned out even better than expected. Everyone worked hard. Tonight, dinner's on me. Yay! President Brown is the best. The whole office erupted in cheers. That same teammate who had once gone to the temple now wore an expression of relief. Looks like my prayers really worked this time. Everything went so smoothly, I guess I'll have to go back and give thanks. What temple was that? I want to try praying for a love life. By popular vote, we ended up at one of the city's famous seafood buffets. Halfway through, I got up to use the restroom and bumped into someone. Sorry. Sis? That voice made me freeze. It really is you. You came back to the country and didn't even tell us? Monica. My younger sister. I answered coolly, what is it? She glanced toward my table full of colleagues, her smile bright. I overheard your conversation. You must be doing well now, being able to treat so many people to dinner. Well, of course, you're such a big blogger now. How could you not be loaded? My face hardened. What are you trying to say? Monica looked unbothered. Sis, don't be so cold. I'm your sister. Not only do you ignore me, you don't even contact Mom and Dad. Mom's back has been giving her trouble lately. You've got all this money, yet you don't send them anything? Isn't that a little unfilial? Her tone turned low and sharp. If your fans knew that you're all glamorous on camera but cold-blooded to your own family off camera, what would they think? So you're here to ask for money. How much? Monica smoothed her bangs, wearing a face of innocence. It's not for me. It's for Mom and Dad. You're the heartless eldest daughter, so I have to think of them instead. I looked at her and slowly smiled. If you're so worried about them, why don't you take a part-time job? Why keep draining their hard-earned money while spending on luxury here and there? Her face tensed. Don't try to change the subject. You and I aren't the same. Of course we aren't. Looking into her eyes, I saw the shadow of my younger self. I was a left-behind child. You were the one pampered and spoiled by our parents since birth. You said, she's old enough to take care of herself, and I got not a single cent of allowance. You said you didn't want to share a bed with strangers, and I ended up with a camp cot shoved into the living room. Monica showed no guilt, only the sting of being exposed. You're really going to hold on to grudges from when we were kids? Mom and Dad still care about you every day, and you're hung up on such small things? I straightened my clothes. Why so agitated? Who said I didn't care about you? I've been watching you all these years. In fact, I know that guy is the rich heir you like, isn't he? Right on cue, a boy with a cocky air walked up, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. You're sweet Sophie, the blogger, right? My sister always watches your videos. Can we take a photo together? I smiled. Of course. Clearly, he didn't know Monica and I were related. He even asked her to take the photo. Her face went pale, her smile stiff, and the pictures turned out awkward and unflattering. The boy grew impatient and muttered, "How can you mess up something so simple?" But Monica didn't say a word in retort. She only kept apologizing. I have something to do. I'll be leaving first. The boy turned on his heel and left, not bothering to wait for her. I understood at once. Leaning close to her ear, I whispered, "Looks like this rich heir doesn't like you very much. If he knew you not only bully your sister at home but also threaten her, what would he think of you? What would your friends and classmates think?" I shook my phone lightly. You know I'm a blogger. I need to record material anytime, anywhere. Our little chat just now, and the way you've yelled at me at home, I've recorded it all. Monica's face drained of color. She glared at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. That's why, I said with a smile, patting her shoulder, making stupid threats isn't worth it. For someone like you, a mistake comes at a very high cost. With that, I strode toward the restroom. After a few steps, I felt a presence. Turning my head, I met Andrew's deep, shadowed gaze. He stood there silently. Who knew how long he had been listening? When we were together, I had never spoken to him about my family background. In my videos, I crafted the image of someone cheerful, optimistic, and full of energy. Andrew would sometimes ask, "Your parents must love you a lot. That's why you're so lively every day, right?" I always brushed it off with laughter and vague answers. The truth was, I grew up a left-behind child in the countryside, living with my grandmother. My parents went to the city to work and hardly ever came back. Later, when they had Monica, I was forgotten completely. They decided I was too old to raise properly, so they poured all their love into Monica. Even my living expenses were rarely sent. Life with my grandmother was harsh. She supported my schooling by tending a single acre of vegetables. She was a fiery woman. When times were worst and I said I wanted to quit school to work, she beat me soundly with a bamboo shoot stir-fry. Do you think you'll earn anything worth mentioning at a job? I've worked my bones to send you to school so one day you'll have a future, buy me a big house, and take me to the city. I promised her I would succeed, that I'd give her a life others envied. But fate was cruel. She passed away before I grew up, falling ill too soon. I went door to door borrowing money, but the 3 children she had raised with her own hands shoved the responsibility around like a ball. They said she had lived long enough, that her death should be considered a blessing. For the first time, I begged my parents for money, even knelt before them. But they refused to help, claiming hardship, even as they strutted around in fine clothes. In the end, my grandmother was dragged to death by neglect. On her deathbed, she told me, "Sophie, the only person you can rely on in this world is yourself. Never forget that." And I remembered. That was why I never showed my suffering to anyone. Perhaps one day, when I've reached worldly success, I'll post a video titled Not Dark History, but My Road Here, a motivational piece to the sound of a triumphant march. I don't want pity. I want admiration and applause. I want to read 10,000 books, walk 10,000 miles. No hardship will block my path. I am a woman among women. A female among females. Andrew and I strolled along the lake. He didn't comment on what he had overheard with Monica. Instead, he brought up old debts. Was our breakup back then because I didn't give you enough security? I was startled that his first thought was to blame himself. But at this point, there was no need for pride. It was because the gap between us was too wide. It made me feel powerless in the relationship, and I hated that feeling. Until I had enough ability to face risks on my own, no amount of security could truly make me feel safe. It had been a small incident that revealed the gap to me. I had seen a travel video about Xinjiang online, a dream destination for workhorses like me. Casually, I said to him, "Let's go there someday." Andrew had replied lazily, "What's the point? Same scenery over and over, I'm bored of it already. Just put a plastic bag over your head, you'll get the same suffocating experience." That was when it hit me. To a rich young master like him, the landscapes of the world were already old news. Of course he could say they were boring. But I had barely been anywhere, not even the overrun tourist traps. We were never from the same world. Parting ways had only been a matter of time. I had to see for myself first. My journey was the stars and the sea. Perhaps one day I would also say, it's just crowds, nothing special. But first, I would have left my footprints. The late autumn wind rippled across the lake, carrying a sudden chill. I stopped in front of him. "Andrew, I never showed you my insecurity. But it was there, like you wearing 3 thick pairs of pants in winter. Outsiders see your calm composure, but only you know you've already messed yourself." The look in Andrew's eyes shifted from tenderness to doubt, until at last his face went blank. I could even see the veins pulsing at his temple. "Sophie, do you really have to bring that up right now? How many times do I have to tell you, I never messed myself? You were the one who insisted I try your new cooking, then dragged me out to that godforsaken forest in a snowstorm." His words cut off. Realization dawned, and his gaze sharpened. "I get it now. Insecurity was just an excuse. The truth is, you were disgusted with me, wasn't it?" I blinked. It really was insecurity. Though to be fair, his stiff-legged walk that day had looked awfully suspicious. Andrew sneered. "You really don't trust me at all." Trust, trust, trust. I hurriedly changed the subject. "So, are you wearing long johns again?" His eyes flicked downward, and he stepped back uncomfortably, his tone icy. "Not like you'll be the one to take them off. Why do you care?" I sighed. "Staying warm is a good thing." Suddenly, Andrew grabbed my wrist. His dark eyes glimmered with a seriousness like an oath. "Sophie, I know you don't believe I truly love you, or that it will last. It's true, you never dared to give me your heart. And it's also true that back then, I didn't do enough to erase your doubts. That's why I want you to give me a chance." I was stunned, my voice hoarse as I blurted out, "What chance?" "A chance to reconsider the possibility of our relationship moving forward. Sophie, just follow your own path. Don't worry, I'll keep up and match your steps." I looked at him for a long time before slowly nodding. "All right." Sometime later, Julia organized a hiking trip. Back when we were abroad, she and I both loved hiking, and that had drawn us closer. She added me into the group chat, it was the same people from the dinner. The moment I joined, the topic shifted naturally to Andrew. "George, Sophie's here. Does that mean Andrew's coming too? Another friend replied, I asked. He said he's busy and won't come. George, busy, my ass. He just doesn't want to hang out. Tell him Sophie's coming, see if he shows up. I nearly laughed. Andrew hated hiking more than anything. There was no way. And then, the next second, Julia invited Andrew into the group. George sent a smirking emoji. Look who finally showed up, traitor. On the day of the trip, a few extra people joined, friends they had invited. Among them was Sophia. No one thought much of it. After all, she hid her feelings for Andrew extremely well. Even childhood companions couldn't detect a trace of her intentions. Amid the crowd, Sophia met my gaze for just a moment. Her lips curved into a provocative smile. She had come specifically to provoke me. Good. This would be interesting. Andrew naturally drifted to my side, tilting his head toward me. Why didn't you call me? I shot him a sidelong glance. And what exactly is our relationship? He had no answer. Instead, he simply took my bag, forcing me to stick with him. After 2 hours of climbing, we finally reached the summit. The view was spectacular. I instinctively pulled out my phone to record footage. When I turned back, I saw Andrew filming me instead. Wherever I went, he followed. Julia and the others stared at him in open astonishment. Wow, is this really the Andrew I know? Did someone possess him? The guy whose limbs were practically atrophying from laziness is now like this after a relationship? Who says love is bad? Love is amazing. Alright, I'm going to find my girlfriend and stick to her too. Get lost. Being watched like a circus act made even me flush. I pushed at him. Can you stop following me already? Nearly 6'2", he stood in front of me like an immovable statue. It was rare to see him without a suit. In a windbreaker, he somehow looked like the lazy, irreverent boy he had been in college. What's this? Blocking the path now? From the corner of my eye, I caught Sophia watching our every move, her expression stiff. I decided to head down a side path to take pictures. Andrew, of course, trailed me step for step. Out of nowhere, he produced a camera and raised it slightly. I've picked up a few skills over the years. Not bad, want me to shoot for you? The sharp retort on my tongue dissolved. Well, what could I do? Who could say no to good photos? Without realizing it, dusk fell. In the group chat, they said they hadn't seen us and would wait down the mountain. As we headed back, I noticed Sophia was still there. Her eyes were rimmed red. When she saw Andrew, she looked up with fragile dependence. Bro Andrew. Andrew frowned. You're hurt? She nodded. I twisted my ankle. I can't walk anymore. Then she winked at me. Sister-in-law, what should we do? So this was what she had been waiting for, forcing me to step aside and let Andrew carry her. At the word sister-in-law, Andrew's brow relaxed, even showing a hint of amusement. I laughed coldly inside but put on a flustered face. You must be mistaken. Andrew and I broke up ages ago. But I heard you two are about to be engaged. As his fiancé, isn't it only right that he carries you? With a single sentence, I ruined both their moods. I was good at this, saying one thing to humans, another to ghosts. Sophia's face turned pale. Andrew's expression darkened. Who spread that rumor? I covered my mouth in mock surprise. Isn't that common knowledge at your company? Sophia often comes looking for you. Everyone says you're a perfect pair, killed me with sweetness. He gave me a helpless look. There's nothing between me and Sophia. She comes to me for work matters, nothing more. As for who I like, don't you already know? The words struck like a heavy blow. Sophia couldn't even force out a smile. Andrew's next words were even harsher. Next time, handle business matters over the phone. Best to avoid misunderstandings. Footsteps approached. Andrew grasped my hand. I called George. He'll carry you down. Sophia lowered her head, murmuring softly, thanks, bro Andrew. Just before I left, I caught sight of a single tear falling into the dirt, vanishing without a trace. Unrequited love with no hope was always bitter. For a second, I pitied her. But really, I had warned her not to provoke me. I was no saint. Get on. Andrew suddenly crouched down in front of me. I glared at him and kept walking. I'm not injured. A short laugh rumbled from his chest. He yanked me back and forced me onto his back. Isn't it only right that I carry you? Well, fine. It wasn't me who would be tired. My lips curved, and I climbed onto him willingly. Down the mountain, his steps were steady, one after another. So, that day we met again, you thought she was my fiancée, didn't you? Andrew asked suddenly. I said nothing. His soft chuckle told me he understood. Then let me explain it once and for all. My parents did once consider arranging a marriage between me and Sophia. But I rejected it from the start. After meeting you, it became impossible. She came to me because her father's company ran into trouble. Their funding chain broke. She was seeking help. From beginning to end, I've only ever had you. The night was cold, yet my cheeks burned hot at his words. If you're explaining, then just explain, what are you smiling at? Andrew's voice was low and unhurried. To be honest, the faint hint of jealousy in you gave me a shameful kind of joy. But I don't want even the smallest misunderstanding between us. Sophie, I really do like you. Very much. 5 years had passed, yet he was still so straightforward, it left me unable to respond. Something in my chest caved in, weightless for a moment. When he dropped me off, Andrew leaned against his car, watching until I disappeared upstairs. I took a few steps, then suddenly turned and hurried back to him. Andrew lowered his head, puzzled. What? I grabbed his collar, tilted my head up, and pressed a kiss to his lips. When we parted, both our mouths were slick with breathless sheen. I smiled. A thank you for carrying me down the mountain. The heated look in his eyes pinned me in place. A tremor rushed through me, blood surging, scalp tingling. By the time I thought to turn away, it was too late. The sensation of weightlessness came again as he scooped me into his arms. With one hand, he sent a message to his driver. Put me down. I snapped. Andrew arched a brow, his sharp bone structure even more striking. That thank you isn't enough. Invite me up for a while. As it turned out, some people never knew when to stop. The next morning, I stretched an arm out of the blanket, covered in marks, to silence the phone that had been ringing non-stop. They'd created a new group chat, without Andrew. Julia, Andrew's gone mad. He suddenly sent me a red envelope and told me to always invite him hiking from now on. George, what for? Can't figure it out. Tag Sophie. The chat was full of mentions aimed at me. I skimmed through, then lazily typed a few words. Sophie, maybe because he got back together with his first love? George, LMAO. Are we just part of your roleplay now? After my warning last time, Monica got smarter. She started pushing our parents to bother me instead. I knew these petty matters would need dealing with sooner or later, so I chose a day to visit. They greeted me with both joy and mild reproach, fussing endlessly over why I hadn't come home. Crossing my legs on the sofa, my eyes fell on the balcony. The camp cot I had once slept on was shoved into a corner, thick with dust. They followed my gaze, their faces embarrassed. Well, you don't sleep here anymore anyway. That bed's useless now. I nodded with a smile, then pulled an envelope from my bag. All the money you spent on me since childhood is in here, with a little interest added. Take it. My mother's forced smile froze. When she realized what I meant, her voice turned shrill. Sophie, what do you mean by this? Are you trying to cut ties with us completely? I rose to my feet. Yes. Don't come looking for me again. No matter what, we're still your biological parents. Do you think blood ties are so easily severed? You look so glamorous now, but if people find out you're an ungrateful daughter, their spit alone would drown you. So, it had come to threats. I laughed softly. Did you ever raise me a single day? If it weren't for Grandma, I'd have starved to death long ago. So stop pretending in front of me like we're one big loving family. We all know the truth. No matter what, we're still your parents. If you don't fulfill your duty of filial piety, you'll be taken to court. I brushed the dust off my clothes. Fine, then go sue me. Didn't Monica tell you what I do for a living? That way the whole world can see just how biased you've been as parents. From the day Grandma passed away, I no longer had any family. I opened the door, turned back one last time with a calm smile. Take this money. All you're losing is a stranger you never cared about. But if you insist on tearing away the last shred of civility, I wonder if your already struggling factory can survive the blow. I can afford to drag this out with you. A few $100 of alimony every month? That much I can pay. Behind me, my mother's impotent fury erupted. I always knew you were a white-eyed wolf who could never be raised properly. I curved my lips, my brows easing. What a beautiful day it was. I hadn't expected Sophia to still be set against me, following me all the way here. Today my car was restricted due to its license plate, so I hadn't driven. I simply got into her car and gave her my company's address. She laughed in disbelief, yet actually started the engine. I heard what you said to your parents. It was the first floor. Of course she could have heard. I adjusted the seat and asked flatly, so what? Staring straight ahead, she gave a mocking laugh. You're a big blogger. Surely you realize if they go online and play the victims, it'll affect you. I looked at her, puzzled. Are they the only ones with mouths? Since I was young, I've been well-behaved and sensible. I've mastered social graces. Everyone praises my character. So why is it only that I'm unfilial to my parents? Netizens aren't fools. The more they distort the truth, the more sympathy I'll get. Besides, I worked in marketing. Manipulating public opinion? That was my specialty. Sophia's lips curved in scorn. You need to understand, once a blank sheet of paper is stained, it's no longer pure. A bad man who does one good deed is said to have reformed. But a good person who does one bad thing is condemned forever. I glanced at her. It was as if I were back at that hot spring years ago, with her lofty tone raining down on me. But I was no longer the girl without leverage. So what? My voice was steady. I've always looked 10 steps ahead. Every decision I make, I calculate the worst outcome and leave myself an escape. If I really intended to live off self-media, I wouldn't have gone abroad 5 years ago to build my career. Overseas, I had relied on strength to carve a path, building up a wide network of contacts. My channel had also evolved, from simple vlogs to professional content videos. Even if they twisted the facts so badly I had to quit the internet, I'd still do well anywhere. I threw her own words back at her. If I were you, instead of clinging desperately to a love rival, I'd be figuring out how to save my family's collapsing company. The car rolled to a stop. Meeting her complicated gaze, I shook my phone with a small smile. By the way, I recorded this conversation. If slander against me really does spread online, I'll put it on your head. After all, you've got a record. And if I get so hurt I leave the country again, whether Andrew comes for you, I can't say. Sophia's face darkened. You really are shameless. I closed the car door with a smile. Thanks for the compliment. Later, I learned Monica had been dumped by that rich heir. In her fury, she tried to drag me down with her. The rumor post hadn't even been up long before Sophia shut it down and scolded her harshly. This video is an original work of the YouTube channel Romance Grove and is published exclusively on this channel. Please don't re-upload or share it on other channels. That day, seeing me on the road, she had followed, not to threaten me, but to warn me. She just couldn't bring herself to say it nicely. I asked Andrew for her number, and when she picked up, I asked directly, "What game are you playing this time?" She gave a bitter little laugh. Appeasement? I want to beg you, don't hold grudges. Don't let Andrew target my family's company. Whether Andrew helps you or not isn't my call. But I don't need him to target you either. You haven't really caused me any real harm. Sophia murmured a soft, "Thank you." After a moment's thought, I added, "As thanks, I won't mention what happened in the past to Andrew. In his heart, you'll remain the pure, kind childhood friend. Let's call that the end of your one-sided love." Sophia was silent for a long time. Finally, she laughed faintly. "Now I think I understand why Andrew likes you. Sophie, I'm sorry." After we got back together, Andrew refused to leave my apartment. And I fully experienced the changes in him. At work, he was a workaholic. At home, he was a perfect housekeeper. 3 meals a day, sweeping, mopping, wiping, he did it all. He was nothing like the man who once needed to be dragged out of bed. Cross-legged on the sofa, I watched him fuss about. Unsolicited attentiveness always came with strings attached. That night, as we lay in bed, I finally grew tired of his clinginess. "Andrew, just say what you want." He pressed against my back, voice deepening with each breath. "Sophie, will you have dinner with my parents? They've been urging me to bring my girlfriend home." Before I could answer, he lightly nipped my ear, his voice sticky, teasing. "If you don't want to, it's fine. Nothing serious." I bit his shoulder. "Enough. I never said I wouldn't go. Now let me take a shower." Triumph glimmered in his eyes. His strong arms scooped me up. "I'll help you wash." The next day, he drove me back to the old estate. To my surprise, the Wilson family treated me with kindness. Dinner was harmonious, the conversation easy, and I felt respected. Andrew's mother even showed me his childhood photos. That same faintly world-weary look was always there. I couldn't hold back a laugh. Andrew's mom shook her head. "If he didn't look so much like me, I'd suspect we brought the wrong baby home. How can anyone be so lazy?" The reason we once considered arranging a marriage was just to push him to have a child quickly. We figured we could raise the grandchild ourselves, since expecting him to inherit the business was hopeless. She smiled as she reminisced. "But then he met you in college and everything changed. He even declared that the only reason he agreed to take over the company was to win you back. He said if we ever gave you a hard time, he'd leave the country and never return. His father was furious. As if we'd ever stoop so low. The fact that you even chose him makes us happy enough. Now, at last, we can think about retiring early." Hearing this, I suddenly realized Andrew's laziness wasn't purely genetic mutation. Andrew's mom handed me a translucent jade bracelet as a gift. "Sophie, if you ever suffer grievances, just come to me." I couldn't refuse and accepted it. I didn't expect Andrew's gaze to linger on the box for such a long time. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing. I just believe what my mom said now." He looked away, but the curve of his lips refused to fade. I pinched him. "What did she say?" Andrew laced his fingers with mine, sighed, but smiled all the same. "She said she's your fan. She watched all your videos from the start and came to one conclusion." "What conclusion?" He snorted lightly. She said, aside from being born into a good family, I can't compare to you at all. She even said if she were you, she'd never choose someone like me. Am I really her son? I'm handsome, good-tempered, generous, how could she? Before he could ramble on, I kissed him. You're perfect. You're the only one I want. Andrew's ears turned red. He coughed and forced a proud tone. You've got good taste. That night, the group chat was lively again. Julia, why did Andrew send me another red envelope? George, he's crazy rich, don't mind it. Julia, screenshot taken. George, I once believed distance and pride would keep us apart forever. Yet standing by his side now, I realize, our journey through pain and longing was only preparing us for this moment of love, steady and unshakable, as vast as the stars and the sea. Extra, Andrew's perspective. After Sophie went abroad, Andrew once visited her home. He had intended to make a good impression on her parents, to lay the groundwork for winning her back. But their indifference and scolding shocked him. He had thought only a happy family could raise such a bright, sunny girl. Until he saw the camp cot on the balcony. Andrew froze. That's. The woman in front of him gave an awkward smile. We're poor. There wasn't an extra room for her. And she didn't come home often anyway. In that moment, it was like a punch landed squarely on Andrew's chest. The sour sting spread through his nose, searing into his head. His heart clenched so tightly he could barely breathe. Stiffly, he walked to the balcony and found a small blue note pinned to the bed frame. My journey is the stars and the sea. He could almost see it, Sophie lying on that cot, staring at the specks of starlight in the black sky. What had she been thinking then? I'll earn lots and lots of money. I'll buy a big house. Every room will be mine. Every bed will be mine. I'll leave this cramped balcony, travel far away, and see a wider sky full of stars. Andrew had always thought of her as a spinning top, never stopping. Not only did she complete his impossible errands with meticulous care, she still had time to film videos about a beautiful life. Even after they got together, she often studied late into the night. How much love for the world must one have to carry such boundless energy? Only then did Andrew realize. Not everyone was as lucky as him, free to idle and waste time without consequence. Did Sophie not want to rest? No. She couldn't stop. She didn't dare stop. Andrew fought with all his strength to still the tremor in his hands. His chest felt sealed in cement, each breath unbearably difficult. A dull ache pressed at his heart, heavy and unrelenting. He pressed his reddened eyes, etching that moment into his memory. Pain. Pain so sharp it nearly killed him. From then on, he didn't disturb Sophie again. Instead, he agreed to take his place in the company. His mother was stunned. Are you possessed? He answered simply, my girlfriend said I was too lazy and broke up with me. To win her back, I have to work hard and prove myself. And when I do win her back, you must respect her. Don't give her any trouble. Not even a little. Because I can't live without her. For 5 years, he revisited every word Sophie had ever spoken. The vague answers, the evasions, the skipped topics, those must have been her fears about their love. It didn't matter. He would remove every obstacle, one by one. When Sophie conquered the stars and the sea, when she returned in triumph, Andrew would greet her at his best. As if those 5 years had never parted them. In the autumn of their second year reunited, they drove together to Xinjiang. In a vast Siberian larch forest, the ground carpeted with golden needles, the air rich with the scent of pine and Sophie's snowy tea fragrance, Andrew dropped to one knee and proposed. It was a trip he had been planning for years. His nerves nearly overwhelmed him. Sophie only froze for a moment before breaking into a radiant smile. The ring slid slowly onto her slender finger. She threw herself into his arms, breath fogging in the chill air. When you have time, take me to see Grandma's grave. Andrew's heart pounded wildly. His voice was hoarse, but firm. All right. For years, I thought laziness defined me, until she left. In chasing her light, I learned to grow, to fight, to cherish. Now that she's here again, I swear never to let her slip away. Sophie is my only choice, my forever, my home.